So one of the biggest things being talked about in the news right now is obviously the whole Israel-Hamas war going on in the Middle East that's raging. It's been going on for a few months. And it's a big deal when it comes to travel in particular because countries like Egypt, Jordan depend a lot on tourism. A good share of their economy is based around tourism. The unfortunate fact is that this war is somewhat dampening tourism to those countries. The whole 2023 year was such a great year for Egypt, Jordan, all the countries bordering Israel. I mean, it was one of the most popular destinations if you talk to any tour operator. What they would do, what they were telling me, like Intrepid, G Adventures, it was just so hot, particularly with the American and UK and European travelers. It was a very cheap alternative to expensive places like Paris that were very popular at the moment, and it was also a new location, exciting. People wanted something that was off the beaten track. So Egypt, Jordan, Morocco, Turkey, all those countries were getting a lot of travelers and a lot of tourism. They were the booming, and I mean last year they were beating their 2019 levels already. But then the war happened in October. It started off with Hamas and Israel starting a conflict, and Israel completely just all air travel was ended. All tour operators ended their trips. The country received a level 4, do not go. So Israel's tourism economy was just shut down immediately from the conflict. But the sad part is that the conflict, like stood in Israel between Israel and Hamas, but other countries like Egypt, Jordan, their trips suffered. So tour operators were still selling trips to Egypt, Jordan, all the other countries around Israel, but Americans and Europeans were worried the conflict was going to spread. The question they were asking was, is conflict going to stay in that part of the world? Is it going to spread to other countries? Are the other countries going to get involved? And that uncertainty in the first 2 or 3 months of the conflict caused cancellations to spike. People were canceling across the board for the Middle East all their trips out of fear of the conflict spreading. I mean, it made it worse, but just watching the news of how horrible the fighting was, so people just canceled the trips. By end of December, mass cancellations had somewhat stopped because people had canceled all the trips they had planned or moved it. And what had happened was, fast forward January, the bookings started picking up a little bit. Bookings were coming up, still very low, but they've been improving. So there's some improvement. I mean, the countries that are doing the better in that region, I would say Egypt, Turkey, Morocco are doing better. Jordan is still doing pretty bad, and Lebanon is doing pretty bad too. The countries with the biggest borders with Israel are doing the worst out of all. I mean, Egypt still had a record year of tourism despite the conflict, so they were to pull it off. I mean, the reality is the travelers that are canceling or who are not supporting the rebound would be the American audiences, particularly. I mean, this conflict is very complicated. And I mean, the situation is very similar to this would be the Russia war. When Russia invaded Ukraine, immediately Poland, Romania, all the countries there, their travel has somewhat dropped. People were scared to enter the countries or they postponed the trips. But fast forward a year later, a few months later, people were like, okay, this conflict isn't spreading. It's staying there. I feel safe. And they started going. Even I went to Poland in last year because I figured, it wasn't a big deal. Or I went at 20, yeah, I went 2023. I went. So in general, what's different about this war though is that it's polarizing, right? Russia and Ukraine, everyone was against Russia, everyone was with Ukraine. There was no there was no polarizing effect. This war between Israel and Palestine is very polarizing between obviously some people support Palestine, some people support Israel, Arabs will more likely support Palestinians, right? And the issue is the American government supports Israel. So if you are an American citizen, you go to these Arab countries, you're somewhat entering territories of people who oppose your government. And even if you were on their side, you could be caught within some type of conflict or some type of anger, and that sticks in people's heads a lot. So, but I mean, anyway, the key takeaway is that travel is recovering to the Middle East, some better than others, but it is not as bad as it was in October, November when things just blew up in mass cancellations.